we'll be sharing links and any information that comes out of the session via email through West Virginia Trail. So I'm assuming that most of you got the registration email through West Virginia Trail. Thanks for being on board with us and for joining us today. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Kelly Pack. I'm the Senior Director of Trail Development at Rails to Trails Conservancy. I'm based in Pittsburgh, but I work a lot with West Virginia partners and communities across the state, and have been working together with a lot of you to help develop this statewide trails group. And one of the things that we're most excited about at Rails to Trails Conservancy, and I'm sure many of you as well, are the new opportunities under the bipartisan infrastructure law for trails, walking, and biking. There's more money. There are more eligibilities under different types of programs. I'll talk a little bit about those today, but since we are lucky to have DOH today with us to tell us a little bit more about how they administer transportation alternatives and rec trails program, we're really going to focus on those two programs today. So I did want to, as I see as people are coming in, thank you so much for introducing yourself in the chat. Keep that going. And I also wanted to take a moment to introduce both of our presenters here in a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to launch a poll to get some more information about where you're coming from. So we have two questions, and you should see them on your screen. If anybody can give me a thumbs up that they see the poll questions. Yes, thanks, James. We want to know if you've applied for TA or rec trail in the past, and if you intend to apply this year. So I'm going to give it a minute. I see we've got about 30% responding. So we know some of you have applied in the past and received a grant. Some of you are maybe thinking about applying for TA in this next cycle or rec trails in this next cycle. And some of you, we'll go ahead and end the poll so you can see. And many of you are interested in applying this year. So I wanted especially for Mark and Travis at DOH to see these results. So we have about half of the folks who have applied and received a grant in the past, and half of the people who are with us haven't yet applied and are interested. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, so like I said, we're really excited to have both Mark Scoular and Travis Hayes with us today. Mark is the grant coordinator for transportation alternatives, and Travis is a division manager at DOH, and he also helps manage the rec trails program. So they'll be providing a lot more information about that process, the application process, and how they administer the funds here in a little bit. I wanted to give you just a 30,000-foot view on the transportation alternatives program and the rec trails program as well. Like I said, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, or IIJA, as it's also called, we have a lot of money toward projects that all of us are interested in, trails, walking, and biking. Within bill, there's also an emphasis on connectivity of systems and equitable access, and also pedestrian and bicycle safety. So the two dedicated funding opportunities for trails that we're going to talk about today are both the Transportation Alternatives and Recreational Trails program. And these programs have been around for many, many years, and they've gone through various changes. And we're just really excited that this latest reauthorization with the bipartisan infrastructure law includes expanded eligibilities for trails, walking, and biking, both within these programs and also some of the discretionary programs that are under bill. So I'm just flashing this slide quickly. We're not going to get into these funding programs today, but I do just want to make sure that you all are aware of some of the other big programs that where trails, walking, and biking are eligible. If you want more information on any of these, reach out to me or check out RTC's funding information using that link below. What we're seeing so far with some of these programs having already been announced and the first cycle has already received applications on some of these through bill, we're really seeing success in where trails, walking, and biking are being incorporated into larger regional projects and multimodal projects as well. So for focusing on transportation alternatives, these are competitive grants that are awarded by states and urbanized regions, so MPOs. There's one MPO, the Huntington area MPO in West Virginia, that also has apportioned funds for transportation alternatives. So you can see that about 95% of the funding within TA goes to bike, ped, trail projects. And there are 10 different eligibilities under the program. And Mark, I know, is going to outline what those are in a moment. And just so that you understand, this is such a big deal to our organization and the trails movement that the TA program is receiving 70% more funding over the next now 4 years. And you can see here that West Virginia's apportionment for Rec Trail program is a little over 1.3 million for this FY, and the TA program is about 10.6 million for this year. So that's significantly more than it has been in decades past. Since 1992, West Virginia has used TA to fund more than 500 projects, more than, probably at this point, more than $120 million invested. You can see some of the average grant size and match rate there. RTC works together with all 50 states to analyze transportation alternatives data. And we collect information about where the funds are spent, how they're spent, how states are apportioning their funds. This is just a snapshot of where we know TA dollars have been invested in across West Virginia. And I'd really love to see this map, even though it's a lot going on there. You can see where the investments in these bubbles, right, are made along our trail networks all across the state. So the key updates for the TA program under the new federal law is, and this is so important, and we've been talking about this with groups, state and local trail groups across the country. We're very excited that transportation alternatives is now open to receive maintenance projects as they were permissible under the Rec Trail program. And we're hearing from folks across the country that there has been success. Every state administers their program differently. So some states might prioritize this. We know in Montana, for example, they are using this new eligibility of maintenance to set aside a portion of their TA funds specifically for repaving some of their well-used multi-use trails. So this is one example of how a state is taking these new eligibilities and using it for the purposes that they know work best for them. There's up to 5% of the total amount that's apportioned to the state for the administrators of the funds to use for technical assistance. And this we were excited about because we know that it's often challenging for trail project managers or communities that might be less resourced or might not have services that a metropolitan planning organization can provide to get to the point where they've got a solid proposal in hand, right? So we're seeing that some states are using some of this funding to do technical assistance programs through their DOT for transportation alternatives. And we know that that looks like in Texas, TxDOT has put out a series of training videos, and they've also developed a cost estimator for projects that's really useful. And that's something that I can share with everyone later. These are just some of the ways that they're using that funding and capacity to increase access to funds. And then, like we said, there's more flexibility for projects categorized as recreational trails too, and some match flexibility. But again, that is determined, every state determines how they're going to set up the match flexibility, and Mark and Travis can talk a little bit about that later. So this is just to wrap up. I wanted to give you that 30,000-foot overview of the full federal program and give you a glimpse of the exciting changes that we're seeing at the national level. And you know, we're only the second year into this bill, so we know that there's already been changes to how states are setting up their application process and administering the programs. We're excited to hear from Mark and Travis about that. This is my contact information, and more information about our transportation alternatives spending report. You can get a better look at how West Virginia and other states are performing in terms of how they're using these funds over time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark to give us a much more detailed look at West Virginia's recreational trail program and transportation alternatives. And Mark, I think you're on mute still.
I am. Right away, I forgot to do that. Thanks for everybody being on. I'm here with Travis, and if anybody has any questions, speak up, or I guess you can at any time raise your hand and go in the chat. I think I can see the chat going on. And you can go ahead and switch slides. Turn it. That's a good one. And we'll start here. And we talked earlier about an important link right at the very top. The grant application link is dohgrants.wv.gov, and that's our webpage. And people have probably heard me go on and on and on about this, but most important aspect on our application, go to the website and register. If you're not registered, register. And that way you'll always get information from, you know, anytime that we send out new dates, new info, like Kelly was saying, maybe new eligibilities, you know, we'll send it out through there. So it's easy to register. It's easy to basically just like anything else, email, password, and contact, and our contact. Also on this front page, and you'll hear me say this again, I'll get it out of the way. In the upper right, you'll see an FAQ. It has a lot of good information on there, and quick, easy to go and maybe answer. Not easy, but there's a lot of questions, and we try to update it. Probably in the process of updating it as it is for some additional info. There you go, Kelly. Turn slide there. Transportation alternatives in the Rec Trails program. And again, I hate to read it, but basically the big important part of the TA is it is a reimbursable program, and that's a key word, always reimbursable program, funding for design and construction. Some of the projects, eligibility projects, on and off-road trail facilities, and in the TA portion, the key point is connecting 2 points between pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized. And that's a kind of a difference between, I'd like to point that out, between rec trails and TAs. You know, maybe you have a downtown portion going out to a park, you could count that as a rec trail, for instance, while maybe a trail is just throughout the park. Includes sidewalks, bicycles, pedestrians, traffic signals, calming, you know, and then of course there's a conversion of the abandoned railroad corridors for trails. Some other things we have is turnouts, overlooks. The new bill kind of talks about the inventory control. We're kind of investigating the outdoor advertising. Basically, it's an inventory, and then historical transportation facilities, maybe old railroad depots that you might want to make into trailheads, like in a good one we're working on. If you're ever up in Berkeley, Berkeley Springs, they have a nice new trail going in, and their trailhead's going to be the old train station. And then we have some environmental mitigation activities. Okay, next slide. Then the RTP, direct trail projects. Important, like Kelly said earlier, maintenance and or restoration of existing trails. Development and rehab of trail side and trailhead facilities and trail linkages. Remember, all this includes design and construction in there. And again, let me know. I'm trying to go closer to the screen if you can't hear me. So if you can't hear, let me know. Acquisition of easements or property of trails, willing sellers, educational programs for safety, trail assessments, and then of course, construction of new trails. Next slide. And if I go too fast, let me know. Here we look at our 2022 applications that we had this past year. And again, if any of you out there and I think you did look like had a number that applied, we're still waiting to hear. It just hasn't been announced by the governor, and I think we're just waiting. So it just is what it is. So, but we had 62 TA applications this year, requesting approximately $23 million, and then we had 37 RTP applications requesting $7 million. So we were at $30 million, and I think going back, it was about 10 million, about 9,800,000 is what we had. So we had a lot of requests. And again, it's an online competitive application process, and we'll talk about the grading and scoring later on. Timeline, grant cycle usually opens and closes. So usually on an opening date, which we had hoped to open, but which is another reason to make sure you're registered, so you'll know one of the ways to learn when it opens is and when it closes is being online. So as soon as we get the opening dates, we'll let you know. Eligibility, again, check your eligibility on the website, but most TA, now nonprofits are new. So that restriction was removed. And that'll be new. Like I think Kelly said earlier, that's going to be new to us. So we'll see how that works out. I've already had one nonprofit ask me about it. So, but I think it'll work good. Now, the only problem on those is, and we might learn usually on TA grants, we don't allow in-kind or any in-kind. So, but maybe we will in the future. And here's the matching requirements: 80% federal, and of course 20% match. You have the cash match, force account match, and again, here's your in-kind, the local volunteers. And I think most of you know what in-kind is, probably used your local volunteer and trail groups to work on it. Again, and I always like to emphasize this: you only receive cash back the federal side, and the in-kind is the 20% match. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. And again, updated, there's new ability to use other federal funds this year, like Kelly said in the new bill. That's going to be new to us, and check with whatever you're going to use. I know we've kind of had a couple questions about that already, and our federal reps kind of said, yeah, it's going to be new to us. So we'll get involved in that. West Virginia DOH contract administration. That we've been using this past few years, contract administration to bid and bid our projects and go through and construct our projects, which is on the TA side for sure. It's cash match in advance to bid, let, and oversee the project. we've come out with a better project that way. We found once we go through and DOH oversees the project, they'll be there. That way, locals, sponsors, it's easier for them to do invoicing, work with the contractors, and it's worked really great for us. And FHWA, the new one, a new rule encourages to use contracts with the youth services and conservation corps. I think we've done that. If you've been to Cacapen Springs, they used a lot of the youth corps up there to build their new bike trails. And DNR advertised the project once, but I think this time we're still going to go through most likely contract administration. Okay, next slide. Slow me down if I go too fast. And here, our 23 grant cycle. Hopefully we were about ready to start, but as soon as we get this, we'll let everybody know. It starts out on the application. You do an intent to apply when you start, before you start with the application process. And when you see that, that's a very simple, probably a 4 or 5 page application. I'll call it intent to apply application. Basically, your sponsor name, get you registered, brief explanation on your project so you don't waste your time going through and doing a project that's not eligible. It saves you time, and once you get okayed on that intent to apply, you can move on to the application. And then you'll have an application deadline, which usually you get about a month to do the intent to apply and then a couple of months to do the application. Next screen. And we're back again to the front page of the application, which is good. Go in, make sure you're registered, and this is where you would log on to. Thanks. Oh, that's good. That's all right. That's an important. There's your DOH grants.wv.gov. That's where you want to go. Some application tips people always ask, and I try to, you can call, and my contacts at the very end, email me anytime for any tips. And also, I'm going to also try to go back if anybody had registered or anybody had applied on 2022, and let's say you don't get that, call me and we can go over your application and take a look at it, and I can give you some tips to make it better. And I might even try to do that a lot if I see them that they were close and as many people as I can. So feel free to call me anytime on that. I'll hopefully try to do that more. Hopefully I'll have more time this year to do that. Here's some application tips. First one, clearly define scope of work. I mean, that's very important. We have on the rec trails or on the TA, people aren't familiar with your projects or what your project's going to do. So, or where your project is. People, they don't, believe it or not, a lot of people, some people don't know where a Cacapen Springs, where a Berkeley Springs is, or Cheat River. So give a good description and a good termini. Where's your project begin? Where's it end? What do you hope to accomplish with this project? Environmental considerations. Do you think there's going to be archaeology issues? Is there streams close? Try to look into that. And any good comments on that really helps, because we do have environmental people also look at the applications, and if they're not sure, it kind of we don't want to get in and have some issues. Previous study or reports, submit that. Again, map outlining the work limits. That's a good, really give it a good map on your project. Again, that's going back to the termini. If you have a good mapping, put that in, because a lot of times people don't know. Here's another very important one, probably the most important one, I think. Quality updated photographs. I mean, if you're out on a trail, maintenance, for instance, you got culvert issues, or even environmental. That's a great one. Just do the best you can. I think we're updating our application online. If you can use your phone, sometimes there might be some issues. I know I've had sometimes, take some time and take pictures. Sometimes, anything you can, because that's important, because for people to see see the pictures, because a lot of times we only get a couple-year-old pictures, and you can tell they're in the snow. And I think that's what one nice thing about starting a little bit later this year. The weather's broken, you can get out there and take some good pictures. Detailed cost estimates, that helps, because even with the additional money, prices have gone up 30%. And you know, if we can, if we see it, it's a low cost estimate. You know, that's you know, we're like, they're not even in the ballpark. So try to get a up-to-date detailed cost estimate. Right away, this is important in both TA and rec trail. On your right away, you know, we can't, you know, obviously go in and condemn anything, but if you have secured right away, if you have any types of you know, donation of the right of way, submit that. Letters of recommendation, we look at that, try to get a local government, you know, county commission, mayor, anything like that would help. Okay, I'm gonna catch up here. Let's see, again, less competitive applications. Just don't put anecdotal information in there. Try to be really specific. Definitely take a look at the environmental aspects. Good pictures, again, pictures around trees, rivers, creeks, anything like that. Utility relocation is also probably could be on that. You know, take a picture of that, take a look at any utility and comment on that. And just don't try to do, you know, it's important to have a beautification project, but try to have some type of scope. You know, we're going to beautify this trail maintenance, but it's going from a nice park to the downtown area to a motel or somewhere like that. Try to add on because to inadequate documentation. And again, insufficient funds being requested. Make sure you ask for enough funds. You know, it's, if you're going to use it, you know, everybody most likely will use a design consultant. Check with the design consultant, try to get them to give you a good estimate, and because you can just request design only for the next step. Okay, next slide. And here's like the rec trail application score. This is how we, everybody takes your application, and I try to send everybody's application online. They review it, and we have an advisory board. And part of the advisory board are DNA representatives, non-motorized representatives from trail groups throughout the state. And then we have motorized representatives, because 30%, and probably something I need to add in on my slides, 30% of the rec trail money does go to motorized, like, you know, ATV trails and everything else, since we have motorized representatives on there to vote on that. And this goes back to your good scope, your good pictures, your good description. The DNR representatives, for instance, they know their parks, they know where they are, but they might not be familiar with your area. Same with the non-motorized. I mean, it's a statewide, we've got people from all over the state, so it helps. And we usually, just a little bit of background, we meet for a couple of days, going over everybody's application and their scoring and involved, and basically high score, we start with the high score, go down depending on the money, and once we get to our I think we had what we had last time, $1.2 million. Once we get to $1.2 million, that's where the those top, I think we had 10 this year, or, you know, looking maybe 10 or 12 possibly applications and awarded. So that's kind of on that. Next slide. And this TA, and if you apply for a TA, we have a diverse scoring committee on there. We have engineers from DOH, we have Travis and maybe will score, we have environmental people scoring. We try to get a wide, diverse group of people, hikers, mostly people from outside, you know, maybe somebody that, you know, from urban area, you know, because we get a lot of sidewalks throughout the state. So we try to get a lot of different diverse group. Based on 100 points, as you can see, accessibility and mobility, how it helps quality of life, Now, the BIL at safety and security, I think is going to be very important this year. Economic vitality, does it help, towns, smaller towns and cities, like the update their maintenance on their sidewalks, et cetera. Partnership and regional significance, how's that work from town to town? And again, that goes back to, if it's a county commission, get some good letters from the county commission. Next slide. Again, slow me down if I'm going too fast. Cash match, one of the important questions, always the matching funds. Number one, we always like cash match. It makes your project go so much easier for you, easier for everybody. Pay up front. We submit it to our contract administration. DOH bids it, lets it, and constructs it. And that sponsor does not have to deal with, they deal with the contractor. They're always involved. We have a pre-construction meeting. Sponsor's always involved. But the DOH will be out there on job inspecting, making sure everything's going correctly. Payment, pay is easy. Makes the paying invoices great. Some of you may have been experienced going with the pay-as-you-go, where but that requires a sponsor to pay for instance, a consultant pay the contractor upfront, and then this is when the reimbursement really comes into effect. Then we'll reimburse the sponsor for the contractors, and it's kind of tough nowadays. That's because with the prices going up. Force account. That's one a lot of towns have used, a lot of cities have used. We try to limit that because some towns and cities and parks, they just don't have the workforce to do force account. But basically, we're reimbursing the towns and cities for their workforce to do the work. In kind, that's most of the trail groups. Volunteer labor, donated materials. Volunteer labor, there's a certain amount of money that I think it's $20 still per person, $20 per person to be to get reimbursed. But again, before I go any farther, you don't get paid for using your in-kind labor. We don't reimburse any of the labor. This is just a 20% to match up that 80%. And I just try to reemphasize that so people don't think they're going to get paid for their labor. But the volunteer labor, donated materials, any kind, we kind of need to try to have in-kind donated prior to project approval. So let us know on that. We're always updating that matching provisions. I know this year we really haven't gotten into it yet. The federal funds and different federal funds are being allowed to match. One of those was, of course, everybody hears the COVID money, and that's something that's kind of locally, it's kind of it's kind of up to the locals to use that. That's just an example. Youth services and conservation corps. FHWA this year looks like they're really pushing that, and that's good. We've had some good luck with that, with the conservation corps. Okay, next slide. Oh, that's it. Sorry about that. Hopefully, if I didn't go too fast again. And does anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Mark. That was really great. I know we're open for questions in the chat, where you can raise your hand or unmute yourself. But maybe to kick us off, I was interested in hearing from folks in the group who are veterans of the TA and RTP program, and maybe some tips or observations they have about the new eligibilities. I'm looking at Ella Belling with the Mon River Trails Conservancy. I know a lot of nonprofit trail groups are really excited about nonprofit eligibility for transportation alternatives, and just wanted to see, Ella, what your thinking is there in terms of the Mon River Trails Conservancy applying for funds and how that changes things for you. And also just any tips that you have for those of us on the call who are interested in applying and would like some advice from someone who's been through it.
Thanks, Kelly, putting me on the spot here. So I actually, in the last year, we were one of the first nonprofits to apply for TAP, and that was the new eligibility for nonprofits to put in for that. But one of my questions I'll ask Mark, and then I'll provide some tips maybe, is just now that nonprofits can be eligible for TAP, and maintenance is now a new eligible item in TAP. Do you have tips on whether, or recommendations on whether people should figure out whether to apply for TAP or Rec Trail? We had, in the past, we were kind of just funneled to Rec Trail, but maybe there's some guidance you can give on which would be best depending on the projects. I will say one thing that we've done when I'm applying for grants is kind of part of the application requires both economic and social impact of, and kind of make your case for how this will impact your communities. So I try to kind of get a vision of how that new project will impact the local space, whether that's connected to schools or hospitals or wellness programs. It helps to get support letters from all kinds of people, whether that's businesses that might be impacted that are nearby, or even getting the school board or your MPO to write a letter of support if it's part of a city connectivity plan or a county transportation planning. It's also good ahead of time to have your projects included in some of those planning documents that the cities or counties might be doing. So even health planning groups, if the hospitals in your area do planning, sometimes you can get your projects written into their plans, and that's certainly a good thing for making the case for your project. But yeah, I don't know whether you want to try to, Mark, answer that question about which do we pick now that it's available to both nonprofits.
Before I do that, I will say, like you kind of said what hopefully I said in a way, with the hospitals and school. It's great if you can fit your project into the big picture, especially if you're like going to a hospital, going to school. You made good sense on that. I'm probably better than me. I mean, there's probably a big scope of work. I'm going to fit my sidewalk or my trail into this big picture, and if you can kind of incorporate it into that, like you just said, that's great. Because instead of just saying we're just going to build a trail, but if you can build a trail from a school to here to there, back up the hill, that's great. I don't know if I make sense on that, but that's a good tip. Wow, that's a lot of times, I will say, just mainly because of the money, you have more room now with the TA money. If you can fit like Ella, you have, yours is really a rail trail maintenance. Going into TA, transportation alternatives, we have more money. You know what I mean? So you have more of I think, fitting it into transportation alternatives, you have a lot better chance to go into, more money to get that maintenance done. So while Rec Trails, it's not even close to the money. And I will say, during our trail scoring, the advisory board, and they like to see new trails, different types of trails, and opening up to more people. So I think that right now, depending on your project, how big it is, I'd like to see, maybe transportation alternatives as much as into the Rec Trails, because but if you got a smaller area, like I talked to somebody actually in your area, I won't mention her name, you would know, Mella, that wants to come into nonprofit. I kind of told her, you know, her smaller project, she could go into the, you know, the smaller the project, come into the rec trail portion. But her bigger project, she had a couple she was trying to decide on that had some little bit more, you know, was going to cost a little more money. We thought, talking to her, I told her to go ahead and go to the transportation alternatives section. So probably if it's a little bit more money, I hate to go back on the funding aspect, but I would lean towards the transportation alternatives.
Yeah,
Just because we have more money, I mean, and Travis will say, just working with the DNR, those trails, prices of trails have gone up 30%. I mean, we've knocked out trails, and that money goes quick in the rec trails.
yeah, that's such a good point. And, you know, just for the benefit of everyone on the call, for a project like Ella's, right, a multi-use trail, it seems like it would make sense to apply under transportation alternatives. And you got to think about the different requirements that your trail project might need to fit, you know, into the TA program. So it seems like, yeah, it would work well for like a multi-use trail, right, where you might have more substantial costs related to a single maintenance project, or it might be repaving, or, you know, maybe you're dealing with some infrastructure issue because of the life of your trail. But you bring up a really good point about, and anybody feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat. I see one from Eric, and it's around speaking on transportation alternatives versus EDA grant funding. And I'm happy to kind of take a stab at that, unless Eric, you want to come off mute and give us a little more context there.
Hi, this is Eric. Sorry, let me turn my camera on here. I think I'm here. So here at Kakapen, we have won 3 RTP grants, totaling $550,000, and recently earned our EDA grant for $3.5 million. I was just wondering if you guys wanted to talk on TA versus an EDA grant. It's kind of gray to me on a TA since I haven't earned one of those. And you haven't mentioned anything about EDA grants.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just jump in and say that those are administered, you know, through different state agencies or through the state office of the federal EDA program, right? So today, since transportation alternatives and rec trails are the primary source for trail funding in West Virginia, because there's no dedicated state source, right? We're kind of mostly focused on that, but you bring up a really good point about how other federal programs are being used to fund trails, including EDA, EPA funding for brownfields cleanup and remediation have been used for trail projects where they're eligible. We know some of you have been successful in receiving funding from the Appalachian Regional Commission as well. So there are many, you know, USDA has programs where trails, walking and biking are eligible as well. So I love that you brought up that point, Eric. There's lots of other sources to look into as well. This is kind of the dedicated one for trails.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. We have a question from Drew on cost estimate timelines for the pay upfront TA process. If y'all like to discuss that or ask verbally. Drew, did you want to jump in and build on that?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Drew Gatlin. I'm the staff engineer for the city of Morgantown. I think we have received upwards of $1.5 million in transportation alternatives fundings over the years, and unfortunately, we haven't spent most of that money, and it's been had to reallocate. We finally have made some progress on spending some of those dollars. but some of the projects are more than 10 years old, right? And so my question is asking about this new pay up front process, right? I think it was probably developed with experiences like with the city of Morgantown in mind, right? That some of these projects take a long time when you're working with local partners, and bringing that more in-house in the DOH is probably a good way, at least on the statewide level, to bring efficiencies to that. Do you have a general idea on project timelines for the pay up front? I guess one would be projects that would be shovel ready, right? That we hand you a set of design documents that conforms with your, with DOH expectations. What year in the future should we use for our cost estimate, right? Assuming that we have continued 6 to 7% inflation, and then say like 20% year over year increase in construction costs, right? Because projects that get built 10 years down the road, certainly we have found are severely underfunded. So, do you have tips on that? Should we use 5-year, timelines? Should we use anything else?
Yeah, I'd say, like you said, each year you're going to estimate, 20, 30% increase, we've been seeing. So a good way I've seen a lot of them do it is they'll put in, again, to go back to, if you have a shovel ready or a design, make sure you submit that with your application. Definitely submit that. And Morgantown has enough experience to know that it has to be, DOH, set up to DOH standards. So submit that, plans with that. And I would say, if you can, possibly try to give 5 years worth of, at least 5 years worth of cost estimates. Maybe not, but, again, unfortunately, like this year, it's been a few months, over for us awarding it. So we're kind of, a little bit right there. So I'd say probably at least go out about 4 or 5 years at least, starting out.
So, right. So would you recommend?
But again, going and that pay up front, really, the big thing was that for us to pay up front is that way you're going through DOH, the sponsor's going to be getting a much better, we feel, and it's shown better in project because DOH is going to be there doing the inspection, doing the payments, taking a lot of the what am I trying to inspections and comments and change orders and things on site and with DOH, where sponsors aren't as experienced at it. So that's the big advantages we've seen with the pay up front.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of municipalities, right, that pay up front, and a lot of smaller communities around the state, right, very much inexperienced in that sense. And right. It, we've seen even locally, right, certain projects that have been funded 10 years ago, right, not allocating for things like inspection, right, and right. The consequences of that can be dire, right? So right. Again, from a statewide level, I think that's a really good idea. It does catch the city of Morgantown and other places that have more professional staff and more experience with that in an awkward place, right? Where there's not really a good place for us to fit to do more autonomous projects, but that's neither here nor there. So would you recommend submitting the funding request, right, the project request at that 5-year total, or, because we can't really say, hey, we'd love you to fund this at, this sort of incremental, like, here's 5 years worth of estimates. If you give us the money on year 2 and we build it, then it's going to be just this amount of money, or, that's this, we don't want to ask for too much, right? Because I feel like you didn't explicitly state it, right? But like expensive projects, it seems like are kind of weighted differently than slightly cheaper projects, right?
Yeah, but and I will say again, goes back to when you do your project description, project scope. Mm-hmm. Say, again, just say that in that project description. This is what a good I probably should go back even, and I was thinking about this as I was talking. A good project description, maybe 2-3 good paragraphs, and inside that project description say Morgantown is looking ahead 5 years, and this is what our cost estimate is, and that's why we're requesting $500,000, and that right there will show the people what you're shooting for. Because believe me, and Travis will back, even I'd rather you be awarded too much money than not enough, because we're stuck in some towns where they underestimated, and they've had an issue, and they put them back a couple of years, but the price is going up 30% every year. Now they'll have to come back year after year and reapply to try to build back up to what it really costs. So
then
really should.
related to the cost increase, because that's something that we're hearing everywhere, right? It's just been really challenging when you submit an application and then, or you're developing an application and then a year later you're dealing with this 30% increase that you didn't account for. Do you recommend including 30% contingency in the application, or can anybody speak to what they're doing to develop more accurate cost estimates?
I mean, talk to people like me in your communities,
Yeah.
right? People that are used to spending hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars on construction projects. We typically have a pretty good idea on at least the trend in numbers that have occurred. I think one thing that's unique with DOH funded projects is that, at least in our area, certain multimodal projects that the DOH has bid out up here have struggled to receive logical bids. Like for a single crosswalk, $350,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just remarkably
Mm-hmm.
expensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of associate that now with DOH projects, right? DOH funded projects. If they're involved, it's going to be like 100 to 200% higher than what we would typically do, right? And I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. I think we're still kind of ironing things out, and it really is context dependent about where you are in the state and who's going to be bidding on your projects. But
that's helpful, Drew. And I mean, I think for others too who are in smaller communities, right, where there might not be the city staff to play that role. And I know we did have, or might still have, some consultancy groups who are represented in the audience, or maybe others who are from small communities where you've maybe found that assistance elsewhere. Let us know, put it in the chat. I know that we're coming up on 1 o'clock. I know that John Burchett had a question for Mark too, and wanted to get to your question, John.
Hey, Mark. We have a designated water trail along the Tug Fork River in Mingo County. We're looking to build out some access sites. Be concrete boat ramps is what we're looking at. Maybe 3 of them. Would it be better, in your opinion, to apply design build in 1 year, or do the design 1 year and then come back with a construction grant the following year?
I think now design and then come back for construction next year, especially on that. I think we've learned that's yes. I think we can get a design and then come back. Yes. And you'll know better on how much prices increase, right, Travis?
I don't know how much to ask for.
Yeah, you'll know how much that's kind of maybe we should have answered Morgantown like that was, you come back, get that design really nailed down, and then come back, like you said, how much to ask for.
Okay.
And it's really not going to delay it that much. And there's a good, once you have that design, and you come back on RT as a trail, grant, you've got the design, you can submit that design, and we go straight to construction.
All right, thanks, Mark.
And another probably quick question from Rich Edwards. He wants to know, would natural surface trail projects funded with RTP be required to use DOH procurement process used by TA funded projects? So is it the same?
I'm going to say most likely yes. We're going to, it depends. Yeah, and then, right, like Travis just said, if it depends a lot on the dollar amount, the size. If it's a bigger one, most likely yes, we'll go with that and use use contract administration. But does it? It depends. I'd say yeah, maybe.
Okay.
And that might be one. That might be one again. If it's a big one, do the same thing. Apply for the design, and then come back. And depending on the size and depending on the amount of match money that the sponsor has, we can kind of. I know that's not giving you an exact answer, but that might. That would be good, again, to go back and do design 1 year and then come back, which is always good. Don't worry about just asking for design money.
Okay. And another,
But
we have a, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
But I think that force account option is still available though, right, for more of the RTP projects as you described, right? So I don't think that
in kind would be possible for usually smaller trail projects, maybe smaller trail maintenance projects.
So would you say that like what you did at Cacapen, you're trying not to do that again around the state?
No, I would, because they used the youth corps a lot up there, and that's fine.
And they also,
it was
right.
It was more compact, right, Travis? It was right there. It was right there in the park, you know, kind of up the hill. But that
it was kind of, I mean, it was kind of a bigger project, right? And it was, you know, you had the kind of the design build sort of nature with working.
It was a big project, but
it was,
but I think,
right?
and I'm sure there'll be some. Right.
Right. So I was just thinking that, you know, you wouldn't, to answer Rich's question, right? Like, you're not going to necessarily discourage the use of those types of partnerships and those types of funding mechanisms, right? Or are you, right? You know, because it did seem like you all made a, you know, that was a really good step forward in efficiency for non-traditional projects. The Cacapen to me is a shining example of like how this program could work in the future. And if we're moving away from that, then that would be unfortunate.
No, I think
we're because
you're good. I'm sorry.
Well, just like, you know, forcing projects like that into the more traditional design process of the TA, right? You know, there's not really an engineering firm that knows how to do what you did at Cacapen, right? And I speak that as an engineer, right? And you wouldn't expect microstation drawings of what you did at Cacapen, and you didn't require that either, right?
No, I don't. Right. No, they didn't require that there. And they had a pretty, I tell you what was nice about the Cape, that they had a good, I'm going to call them a foundation, and maybe is that, I mean, they had a foundation, they had IMBA. I mean, it wasn't just a group of people working, and I mean, and they had, I think they kind of had a good idea, and
that's Eric Fitzpatrick. He's with Cacapen too.
Oh, okay. Here's Eric. Okay.
And we,
yeah, it was 2 RTPs.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
And it turned out great.
Thanks for the discussion and back and forth. I think it's helpful to hear, you know, like we said, many of you on the call have either had experience with these particular grant programs or the process, right, that it takes to get to grant applications, whether it's TA, RTP, or others. One more question we had from Ryan, and is it Hugh or How?
It's Huff. Everybody.
Huff, sorry. Hi, Ryan.
The first time. Hello. I know we're at 1, so this is just a quick hitter. I'm new to this space. I'm a transportation engineer. I work for a consultant. I'm not privy or up on, you know, the grant application side of things, but a question I have that's related to cost estimates, and Mark, or, you know, Callie, or anyone else on the call, is there a repository of bids that can be pulled where somebody could access, recent unit bid costs for, these various projects that are getting bid out. I'm used to working in Pennsylvania. I work from home on Pennsylvania projects. Typically they have, their PennDOT has the ECMS website that's super easy. Any projects that's bid through PennDOT, you can access whatever all the various bids that came in. So Mark, I guess I'm asking, what's an easy way to as you're developing the cost estimate, what's an easy way to kind of pull latest and greatest costs that contractors are throwing out for these projects?
And you can get on BidX and review all the winning bids and the cost estimates, or not cost, the cost of everything and winning bids, and everything's, right there on the DOT website.
Okay.
If you want, I don't know it off the top of my head, email me and I'll get Adam or someone in our office to maybe reply and give me that. But you can get on the DOT. You might have, I think you probably have to be registered and get on with BidX through DOT and DOH, and you can review all the, all the bids. Our bids are through BidX. It's open by the district, and the prices and everything are there. So but you're right. That's probably the best way to go through there.
State purchasing.
State purchasing, right? Yeah, state purchasing and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks. And
Email
yeah,
me. Like I said, and you can probably, you probably, once you go in there, find all the, BidX and all the winning bids.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Mark and Travis, for your time. This was a really helpful conversation, and we hope to continue it together with you. We had a lot of people stay throughout the whole call. I just wanted Mark and Travis to know that, and really, again, really good representation from local trail groups to city officials to local tourism, state tourism, a lot of interest in these programs and a lot of really great questions. So if you all are interested in continuing the conversation or learning more, you can reach out to us. You'll get an email follow-up from this with a recording and all the links and slides so that you can have those for reference. And feel free to reach out if you have any ideas for future trail talks that West Virginia Trail can host and provide, or if you're interested in sharing a case study or lessons learned from a project that you're working on, we'd love to hear from you. But wanted to thank everybody for their time, the great conversation. Thank you, Mark and Travis, so much. And we look forward to seeing and talking with you again soon. Take care.
Anytime. Call us
Thanks
anytime.
so much. Bye-bye.